Hi, everyone, and welcome to Youth for Torah. Why do we call ourselves Youth for Torah? Well, if you guys read Ecclesiastes 12:1, it says, "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them." So now more than ever, all the youngsters throughout all the world, wherever they are, need to search for the Lord now. Now is the time. Now is the calling. And what's the better way to search for the Lord than to study and keep his commandments? So that's why we are now seeing the book of Genesis. Last week we saw the first chapter, and now we're going to see the second chapter of the book of Genesis. And before we start talking, just to let all my viewers know, all the videos used in this PowerPoint have their own owners, their own authors, and are used for informational purposes only. Thank you. Let's go ahead and get started. Very well. The Shabbat. What is the Shabbat? The Sabbath, the seventh day. We're talking about the day of rest of the Lord. Once the Lord had finished doing all his work of creation from day 1 through day 6, like we saw last week, we enter into this moment of the Shabbat, which means rest. This would be the seventh and last day of creation, and that's how chapter 2 starts. So let's see what we have to learn of the Shabbat. Okay, here would be the Hebrew word for the Shabbat. That would be a shin, a bet, and a tav. The word itself means rest. And if we look at the meaning of each of the letters, just like I was showing you the last week in that pictogram, here we have that shin is like to consume or to fulfill or like to make it happen, but basically to fulfill. Then we have bet, that is house or inn, but basically house. And we have the tav, that is a covenant. So it's to fulfill the house of the covenant, or in other words, to enter or to be a part of the house of the covenant. So when we keep the Shabbat, when we celebrate the Shabbat, like the Lord commands later on, when we see the study of the book of Exodus, when the Lord commanded to keep the Shabbat in Exodus 20, he did not just like order it just to order it. He asked us to do this so we can enter into a special covenant with him, so we can be with God. And as we see over here in Psalm 4:3, it says, "Understand that Adonai sets apart the godly person for himself. Adonai will hear when I call to him." Or that would be Psalms 4:3. In some Bible version, it's Psalms 4:4. Here it says that the Lord separates for himself those that are godly people, the ones that set themselves apart from the worldly things. The Shabbat has that purpose, to set you apart from all of the things of the world, all of the things of the enemy. When you want to enter into a special moment with God, you need to get everything that is not of the Lord out of your thoughts, out of your life, and just for a moment focus on God. And throughout the week, when we have all that hard work, when we have the studies with all the tests, and sometimes like we have like different fights and issues, and throughout the whole week, like we have so many ups and downs, and the Shabbat is very needed, because in the Shabbat is when we finally block our mind from all of those things and enter into a holy moment, a moment set apart for the Lord. Now, the Lord did two very important things for the Shabbat. It says that the Lord blessed the Shabbat and sanctified it. So here we have Barach, that is to bless. And what's interesting of this word Barach, that's to bless, if we see again the Paleo Hebrew of it, is the house of the first set apart. So the first we already saw in the previous video, the first is Yeshua, because Yeshua himself said, "I am the first and the last." So what does it mean? It doesn't mean like to be separated, like, it's like gone. When it says to be set apart, it means that it is being taken out from all of the things of the world and put into a very special moment. Kind of like in this photo, this light bulb. All of these light bulbs are without light. And basically it means that these light bulbs have no use, have no function. They're useless. But as you guys can see, this light bulb here it's shining, it's working, it's useful. This light kind of represents the Shabbat. While all the world is spiritually dead, when we enter the Shabbat, we're having a spiritual revival. Why? Because we're entering Yeshua's day of rest, Jesus' day of rest, God's day of rest. We're entering a moment with Him. That's why it says the house of the first set apart. Then we have Kadash, that would be to set apart. And what's interesting is if we take each of these little letters in the Paleo Hebrew, we see a doorway to heaven. So, like every time we keep the Shabbat, since it's set apart, it's like we are connecting to heaven. It's a doorway to heaven. Isn't that beautiful? That's why, and for so many other reasons, it's very important to keep the Sabbath and to enter into that special covenant with God, to be a set apart for Him from the world, and to be closer and closer to Him, a doorway to heaven. Very well. Then we see that once the Lord finishes with the 7 days of creation, we enter now into a new scenario. Moses starts describing how it was, how the Garden of Eden was in that time before the creation of man himself. So it says that the land of the Garden of Eden was, since man hadn't been created yet, it had to be watered. But when it had to be watered, it said that a mist would come from the ground to water all the land. And it said that it did not yet produce because man needed to till the soil. That's one of the main functions of man, as we saw in the first video. The Lord told Moses to take care of, told Adam to take care of the land, of the animals, and all of his creation. And part of that is also to take care of all the plants. So what is this mist? And here's where I want to mention about the fountains of God. Why do I say this? This mist is called in Hebrew Ed. What's interesting is that there are only 2 places in the Bible where this word ed or mist is mentioned. The first is here, when it mentions that this mist came out to water all the land. And the other place where it is mentioned, I'm going to show you right here, is in Job 36:27 that says, He makes the droplets of water which condense into rain from His mist. And what's interesting is that if we take this aleph and this dot and see the Paleo Hebrew is God's doorway or God's gate. And we've seen many places in the Bible that it mentions that God has His certain water chambers. And here we see that the only 2 places that this word ed or mist is mentioned, the first place that is mentioned refers to a water source from the ground, and the second is mentioned as a water source from the skies. And this, I personally think, will help us understand better when we'll see later on the flood in Genesis 7, because in Genesis 7:11 it says that God opened the fountains of the heavens and opened the fountains of deep in order for the waters to pour out and fill the earth, and that's how the flood happened. So I think that this gives us like a preview, a sneak peek on what was about to happen, in that there is some water source that God holds, of course, up in the skies, as we know, with the whole process of the rain, and of course underneath there is a presence of water, and that has it's been proven to be true. So I think that's pretty interesting. Very well. Now we're going to leave that aside for a while, and we're going to talk about the creation of Adam. We know that Adam was created on the 6th day, but we are going to see some very interesting things about it. We already saw last time how in the word Adam there is this beautiful connection, how there is this spiritual side that connects us with our Creator, and of course, there's the physical side that we see that that's how we interact, that's how we live, how we relate to others. This is the physical thing that we see. But we also have that spiritual side that connects us to God. That's why we need God. Basically, to reject God would be to say, we don't exist. So now we're going to see in detail the creation of man. So let's talk about the creation of man. So for the creation of man, we have this word, yatzar. Now, yatzar is very interesting because this word is, of course, it's translated as, and God formed man out of the dust of the earth, formed. It's translated as formed. But this word, yatzar, it's also translated in the Bible as a potter, when, like when the potter molds the clay. So it's really interesting the picture that it gives us, because when God creates man, we see that from all of his creation, God takes the time to shape man from the earth. I can imagine him like even I can even dare to say that he shaped even from the smallest cell, and little by little making all the tissues and the organs until having the complete body. But like still, God took the time to fashion man, to mold him, just like a potter with a clay. So that's kind of like the image that Moses wants to give us in this moment. It's like when God made man, he was forming man with his own hands and giving him like all the shape of his head, of his nose, of his neck, everything. So it's like God had that special love to give time to like all like just an artist with his creation. It's beautiful. And this other word that I like this word here, we can also analyze it in its Paleo Hebrew. We have the Yud, the Tzadi, and the Resh. And as we can see, is hand, that's or to make or to form, that's the Yud. Man on the side, it's the Tzadi and the first. So also this word Yatzar, that not only gives us like the idea of how God made man, also gives us the whole panorama of what happened. Man on his side, it's basically Adam laying down and God's hand making the first man. So it's pretty cool how like just in one word, God tells everything that he was going to do in that moment. Then here is this verse in Psalm 33:15 that also has the word yatsar, in this case, fashioned. He who fashioned the hearts of them all and understands all they do, when it's talking about the Lord. So as you guys can see here, he fashioned, he formed our hearts. I can imagine just the Lord making every single detail of the heart. So if he has made us in such beauty, he understands how every single part of us works. He understands us, he knows us more than we do. So that's just amazing. And it says that God made man out of the dust of the earth, out of the earth. And this word earth that is used, it's the word Adama. Now, what's interesting, as you guys can see, how we had talked in the previous video, what was the word for man? Adam. And that same word is located in the word for earth, Adam. But in this case, it adds the hey and then transforming it into Adama. Now, if we analyze this word, the aleph leader, the dalet, that's like a doorway or to introduce or to walk through, like a gate. Mem could be mighty, chaos, or water. And then we have hey that can be behold, here it is, or breath. So the leader introduces mighty breath. So of course, here it's talking about Adama is the earth, but it's also giving us a small sneak peek of what God was going to do. He was going to breathe his mighty breath into Adam in order for Adam to become a living man. Very well. So we're going to see right here, once the Lord had finished forming Adam, he did something interesting, different to what he had done with the rest of the creation, because he said, with the rest of creation. For example, let there be living creatures in the waters, in the air, in the land. And he said, let it be, and the animals came to existence. In man, he took his time to form man. For man, in order to become a living being, he does something interesting. We're going to have here two important words. We have nafach and we have af. So this nafach is to breathe or to blow, and af would be nose, because we see in the verse that it says, and the Lord blew the breath of life into the nostrils of man. So this nafach, if we analyze it in its Paleo Hebrew, the noon, the pei, and the chet, we have life from the mouth separate. So now, life from the mouth separates. The first question that comes to our minds would be, whose mouth? The answer is with the word nose, af. Af is, here we have the aleph and the pei, the leader's mouth. So from the mouth of God came life. And to separate what? Here we can understand two things. First, we know that before the Lord blew into the nostrils of Adam, Adam was a non-living being. Once the Lord breathed into his nostrils, Adam became a living being. So we can understand it as a separation between what is not living to what is living. In other words, God is the only one who can give life. That's the first. And the second is what I find very, very interesting is, for example, as you guys know, when a baby is being formed in a mother's womb, there occur many amazing things during pregnancy, but basically, each organ develops at a certain period throughout pregnancy. And the lungs, they form throughout the whole pregnancy, and the lungs have to have this surfactant that's like a very special oily liquid that allows to repel tension, so that when breath enters the newborn baby, the lungs can expand. But while the baby is in the mother's womb, the lungs are collapsed. The baby receives oxygen through the uh, the the blood circulation that we have in the placenta. So like that's where the baby has his fountain of oxygen, his source of oxygen. But once the baby is born and the umbilical cord is cut, the baby has that first gasp of life and it's a very, very, very strong gasp for breath. And like it has to be at a very high pressure in order for the lungs to expand. So this is another way we can understand this separation, because we can see that Adam's lungs were probably in that moment collapsed. So when the Lord breathed into his nostrils, with that breath of life, given at a certain pressure, was able to expand. In other words, the alveoli that were collapsed had to be separated in order for the lung to expand. So that could also mean this separation that occurs. And what's interesting, sometimes you guys may ask yourself, but why didn't the Lord breathe into Adam's mouth? Well, from the nose, from the beginning of the nose, all the way down to the last part of the lungs, that would be the alveoli, that's like the terminal point, that would be the last point. That is all the respiratory system. So what I believe is that when the Lord breathed his breath of life, the first system to come into work or to come to function would be the respiratory system. And like it's amazing just to think about it. Now, many times I've heard it said, and I think that's pretty amazing, that when we breathe, we we pronounce in some way the name of God. That's why I think it's so important to understand how the Lord had to create first the respiratory system, because there's not like it's not going to be for no reason that the Bible says, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. Because when every time that we breathe, it's like Yahweh. we pronounce the name of the Lord. And it's beautiful to hear it's just amazing to hear the breath of life. And like it's really sad that nowadays with all of this pandemic going on, that the main place of attack of the virus, where is it? The lungs. The virus destroys the lungs in a very terrible way. And well, has to be from the enemy. But we have to be in constant prayer for all of those who are right now suffering from this virus. Anyway, let's continue. Okay. Now, what did the Lord breathe into Adam? We know that it was the breath of life. So this breath is nishmat in Hebrew. Now, nishmat in the Bible has four main uses. First, breath of Elohim, that would be the breath of God. Second would be the breath of man. Third is used also for every breathing thing. That's where neshama comes from. Then we have the spirit of man as well. And it has all these uses. Now, one of the other occurrences of this word nishmat, like as it is nishmat, we also have this word in Proverbs 20:27. And I wanted to mention this because every time I read this proverb, it was mind-blowing for me. Because it says, the spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all the inward parts. Now, if you guys stop and think for a moment, what does a lamp do? A lamp shines. A lamp, as we saw like in the previous video, allows darkness to like dissipate, to be gone. Where light is, darkness cannot be. So like it makes visible things. Like when you are in a dark room, you cannot see where you're going. You need light in order for you to see and not fall and not hurt yourself. And we saw how the light, Yeshua, the word of God, he was like the living Torah, the living word of God. We saw how he is our light. So in order for us to see, for us not to be spiritually blind. So God's breath of life gave life to our bodies. Like everything that was non-living became living through his breath of life. And also at the same time, God's light, that is his word of truth, our Bibles, allows us to not live in a world of darkness, allows us to see, allows us to be able to know where we're going so we don't fall, we don't hurt ourselves. But also, once we receive the light of God in us, we have to shine that light out as well. So we receive life in us, we receive the light, and what comes out of us when we speak, when we act, when we think, all the things that we do have to shine the light of God unto others. That light has to bring life to others. So when we share the word of God, we have to be a blessing to others so that others can also know the true life, the life in the Lord, and become true living spiritual beings. Okay, and then what's interesting in this verse, it says searching all the inward parts. Now, in this case, these inward parts, oh, here we have a beautiful little lamp. That's how we need to be, a lamp on the stand, not hiding. This word for inward parts is baten. Now, baten is an interesting word because sometimes it is translated as body, like as a whole body, and sometimes it's translated as womb, like the uterus. So, like, of course, when God breathed his breath of life, he gave the living light to all our body. But where else occurs the miracle of life? In the womb. Of course, God created Adam and Eve in the beginning, but God gives that beautiful gift of life in conception when the sperm and the ovule connect. That's in that precise moment occurs life. How? Well, scientists discovered that whenever the sperm, and in this case, well, it says human egg, connect, there is something that's called a zinc spark. And this zinc spark is reflected as light. And I'm going to show you right here in this video. Some time here. A big thanks to the people who made this video. It's very beautiful. You guys are going to see. Did you see that flash? This is in fluorescent, I believe. There's a flash, and then we see that the cell starts having different changes in order to have the multiple fast divisions to create the morula. Now here we have in another, when the eggs are fertilized versus when the eggs aren't. It says the right two eggs are mature. So check and see in this video right here, you're gonna see that it's gonna light up. There we go. Here we have that spark. So here we have, you see, these blastocysts, those are the ones that have been fertilized. Look how they have that boom of light, that spark of light. That, in that precise moment, is when God is giving the gift of life. Because in that moment, it's no longer just two different cells. It's becoming one cell, and it's going to undergo a different change in the process of multiplication and division in order for that from the union of two single cells to become a whole living being. Did you see that? It's amazing. It's just beautiful. And this, can you believe it that like after so many, I would say probably at least after 5,000 to 6,000 years after, we can see how like scientists have to like prove it to the whole world what God has shown ever since the beginning. It's just beautiful. Okay. Very well. So now let's talk a little bit about the Garden of Eden, because after the creation of man, it starts talking about the Garden of Eden itself. Okay, so here we have the word Eden. We have Ayin, we have Dalet, and we have Nun. Now, if we see the Paleo-Hebrew of Eden, we see to experience a pathway to life. Why do I think it's like this? Well, because in the Garden of Eden, in the center of the garden, we had the tree of life. And Adam and Eve, to a certain point, as we know, had access to that tree of life. Very well. Now, I want to show you guys these pictures because many people have debated and questioned as to where was the true location of the Garden of Eden or the land of Eden. So in this case, we're going to use only Bible verses to have at least an idea. We're not going to say, yes, it was here, this is the exact location, but at least for us to have an idea of as to where it could have been. So I'm going to use some photos that I personally think have like an approximation as almost to what I think where the Garden of Eden was. So for example, here in Genesis 4:16, we see that says that Cain left the presence of Adonai and lived in the land of Nod, wandering east of Eden. And we also have that 4 rivers came out of the Garden of Eden. They literally spread out from there. We have the Tigris, also known as Hiddekel. We have the Gihon, the Euphrates, Perat, and we have the Pishon River. So each one of them, what I really like is that they have a small description, and there are many verses that mention as to different locations as to where they could be, so they can give us a whole idea. Because if we trace the rivers back, we can probably say in some way that the Garden of Eden was located. So before that, I wanted to show you this map. It's important. Here we have Israel, which personally, if we really read the boundaries, like if we read the whole limits, the whole perimeter that God gave the children of Israel, it actually shouldn't be this small. It should actually be bigger. Personally, that's what I think. But anyway, it's sad that many people are fighting to achieve Israel, but Israel belongs to the Jews. We cannot say otherwise, especially Jerusalem, that should be the capital of Israel. And I'm not afraid to say that. Like, Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel. It belongs to the Jews. Okay, so here we have the Persian Gulf, and as we saw in the previous picture here, this would be the Persian Gulf. This is like a zoom in of the picture. This is where I personally think was the Garden of Eden. Like I said, you guys can have another opinion on this, but this is where I personally think was the Garden of Eden. Why? And here's where we're going to see. First, we have some descriptions here of the land of Havilah, that we know that the river Pishon passed through it, this river Pishon. Now it says, first one that we have here in Genesis 25:18 says, Ishmael's sons lived between Havilah and Shur, near Egypt as you go toward Ashur. He settled near all his kinsmen. So it's like when you go toward or near the land of Egypt. So here we have the land of Egypt. You know, it's all this expanse. So if a river has to go toward the land of Egypt, and the land of Havilah was next to the land of Egypt, then we can have an idea that it is probably in this area right here. I'm not sure if you guys are seeing let me see if I can hit the laser pointer. On this area right here. Because like I saw another map where it said that the land of Havilah was over here. It would be like on the right side of the Persian Gulf underneath the Caspian Sea. But personally, I don't think so, because it says clearly here that it is near Egypt. So it has to be somewhere around here, because all of this would be limited with Egypt on this area, actually. Because if you go toward this area more on the south, it's already different. It's other places of Africa. It's no longer Egypt. But Egypt had more all this expanse over here, if we look at it in some point. So that would be one. And then it also says here, then Shaul attacked Amalek, starting at Havilah and continuing toward Shur at the border of Egypt again. So again, personally, I think that the land of Havilah, of course, I'm not going to give exact, like boundaries of to where it was, but personally, I think it's in this area. So if the land of Havilah would be in this area, then of course the river Pishon would have crossed through this area as well, and probably, as you see in this photo, could have given its way toward the Red Sea. Okay, see pointer here. Okay, so then we have the next river, that would be the Gihon River. Now, as you guys saw in the previous photo, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back here really quick. Some people say that the Gihon River over here goes toward the north of the Garden of Eden, and that would be like more east from what the other rivers are. But like if we read these verses here, it gives us another idea that perhaps it did not go northward to where Eden was, but perhaps it also went in a similar direction as the other rivers went. Because here, for example, I'm going to show you this photo here of Jerusalem, and we have Hezekiah's tunnel. We're going to see the verse right now. But for example, I wanted to show you guys this because the pool of Siloam formed itself from a water course deviation that Hezekiah did during his reign. First, we see in 1 Kings 1:33 that says, David, this is David talking, he said to them, "Take your Lord's servants with you and have Solomon my son mount my own mule and take him down to Gihon." Take him down to Gihon. That would be this area over here. And then we see in 2 Chronicles 32:30 that this same Hezekiah also stopped the upper water course of Gihon and brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered all his work. So he basically cut the water course of Gihon and brought it toward the south, this area of the city, the west side of the city, well, toward the pool of Siloam. This is where, like, this is the ending of that water course. It basically flowed to this area and filled this pool. So if this water course of Gihon came from the river Gihon, then I really doubt that the river Gihon went toward the north as it is shown in certain maps. Then that would mean that Israel being toward the west of the Garden of Eden's possible location, then it means that that river had to flow toward Israel. But that would be if this water course of Gihon, if we're talking about the same river Gihon. In that case, Gihon would have reached all the way to the city of Jerusalem. And what I find interesting of this pool of Siloam, that is of the water course of Gihon, what happened in the pool of Siloam? Well, one of the miracles that Yeshua did when he met this blind man, and he spit on the dirt and put it on the blind man's eyes and asked him to go and wash his eyes in the pool. So that's what he did. And that's one of the miracles of Yeshua. So everything happens for a reason. And I personally think that this river Gihon had its own purpose, and it was to manifest one of the miracles of Yeshua. Then, of course, we have the Hiddekel, that would be its correct name, the Hiddekel River, but also translated as Tigris River. We see one of its occurrences with Daniel. Here it says, here, let me check really quick where this river, it's Daniel 10, when he has a vision of a man. We're going to see this in full detail when we make the study of the book of Daniel. But right now, it's just to mention as to where else in the Bible it was mentioned. It says, at that time, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 whole weeks. I hadn't eaten any food that satisfied me, neither meat nor wine had entered my mouth, and I didn't anoint myself once until 3 full weeks had passed. On the 24th day of the first month, I was on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, when I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, wearing a belt made of fine Uphaz gold. Okay, so here we see that, and we know that in that time, Daniel was up in what we know as Babylon, that later on passed to be Middle Persia. You know, he was at least in the reign of Babylon and the Medes and the Persians. So that was toward the north of where Israel was, like northeast, like going towards what we saw on the map. So I think that position that they put the Tigris River. Let me see if I can go back really quick here so you guys can understand what I'm telling you. Here we go. So we have Israel here. So basically, many people say that here in Iraq and Iran, all this expansion might have been what we know as the Babylon Empire, the Babylonic Empire, and then we see later the Medes and the Persians. And as you guys see here in this map, here we have the Tigris. So I think this is an accurate point of the Tigris River, where Daniel would later on be when he received this vision in Daniel 10. Very well. So let's continue. And then, of course, we have the Euphrates, and here we have Prophet Jeremiah. And this also, I'm going to explain it in detail later on. But one of the most important verses that I think that have a very important relation to the Euphrates River is in Jeremiah 13 from 1 to 11, when the Lord asks Jeremiah to take this linen belt and to place it in a rock near this river. And then later on, we see that the cloth gets ruined, and then God tells Jeremiah to prophesy against the people of Israel. But we're going to talk about that in detail when we make also the study of its respective book, the book of Jeremiah. But this is, I think, it's another important mention of it. So Jeremiah had to go all the way to the Euphrates in order to do so. And as we also know, the Euphrates was one of the boundaries, I believe, of Israel. That also shows that Israel's territory nowadays is small compared to what it should be. Very well. Then we have the forbidden tree. Now, this forbidden tree, we know that in the garden we had two main trees. We had the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And what's interesting is that when God tells Adam and Eve, if you eat from this tree, you shall surely die. It is translated as surely die, but in the Hebrew, it is mot tamut. Now, what's funny and very interesting is that both of these words mean to die. So it's like he's literally telling them, if you eat from this tree, you're going to die, but like dead. You're gonna surely, that's why it's translated like surely die, but it's like die, a double death. Why? Well, because number one, they were going to die spiritually because they were disobeying the word of the Lord. And number two, because then they were going to enter that mortal life. They weren't going to have that eternal life that they were promised in the beginning, but now they were going to have their years counted. And eventually, that's where we all end up now. We live our life to a certain point, hope, like we all hope that we can reach the 120 years, but actually the life rate of most countries is lower, way lower than that. We're talking about 70, 80 years. So, and people end up dying. So that is the consequence. So it's like, you shall surely die. Mot tamut, spiritual and physical death. Very well. Now we're going to introduce someone new into the picture. We're talking about Chava, Eve. That would be Adam's wife. That would be the first woman. My ancestor. Well, she's the first woman. So now we're going to see some important aspects of like some detailed aspects of the creation of woman. First, it begins saying that, well, once the Lord had finished everything, he saw that everything was good. He saw that everything was good, everything was beautiful and perfect. But then he says that there was something not good. Does that mean that there was an error? No, that means that God was not finished yet with his job, because it doesn't have to do with like with something that he made or the state, like something went wrong. No, because God is perfect. This something that was not good is because he was giving us an idea of something that was going to happen. And what was this thing that was not good? It was that Adam was alone. That would be the levado. He was alone. So, but like you must think like, but Isabella, that's like a really, really sad word. Why would somebody like say, oh no, but this is actually good, like to be alone? No. Now, this word is very interesting. In order to explain it to you, I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half, because again, the Lord is perfect. Everything that he does is perfect. So there's a reason for everything. He said there is something that is lo tov, not good. And that is that man is levado, alone. And this levado, if we divide it in half, we have the first two, a lam and a bet, that would be the same word for heart. But if we see it's the Paleo Hebrew of these two, we have a house of teaching, house, bet, teaching, lamed, and then dalet and vav, a doorway or a pathway to add. So here we have, to begin with, that, in other words, God was saying, no, you are not complete yet. It's not saying that there was something wrong with his creation. No, it was saying he needed to add something more so that creation can be complete, so it can be a whole. So here it means that in order for Adam to be spiritually complete, Eve had to come into the picture. Why? Because a house of teaching, what does that sound like to you? A home, a family. Where your first education starts is at your home. Your first teaching, your first rules comes from your parents. Then later on you go to school and you learn different things. But the first teaching comes from your home, from your family. And in order to make that family, that beautiful house of teaching complete, there needed to be something that had to be added. So there was a missing part. Adam was a part of a whole. He needed his other half in order to become one whole. Okay, then we see that God decides to make for him a fitting helper. So here we have Ezev, that is a helper or to help. and, and then we have the word kenegdo, and kenegdo is what was translated as fitting helper, but actually this word does not, it's not it is not translated correctly because it does not mean fitting. The word connecto actually means to be in front of, in the side of, or opposite to. So it's kind of like you're facing someone, like someone is in front of you that you have before you. So it's like this shows that it is not someone like that like as if to say that Adam wasn't like he wasn't like something was wrong with him. No, it was that he needed someone in order to complete the house of teaching of family, and that someone was someone completely opposite to him because a woman is very different from a man in many ways. But it also had to be someone that had to be in front of him, in his sight, someone that he can rely on, someone he can count on, someone that no matter what was there for him, was right in front of him. It was not someone that, because if it would be behind him, he can't see women, and woman cannot help him because man would be giving his back toward woman. There's a reason why it says it. This helper had to be in front of. That means that this helper had to be present at all times, and it also meant that that Eve was going to be there literally, despite being in opposite toward Adam, but together they were going to be spiritually complete. Very well. Okay, so then we see that in order for excuse me, in order for Eve to be created, now this is what I find very cool, being a medical student, is that this is the world's first surgery. You can probably call whoever you want the first surgeon of the world, but actually the first surgeon was God. Because it says that God puts Adam into a deep sleep in order to remove one of his ribs, and from the ribs all form and make women. But as we can see, the whole process is kind of like what we do a surgery today. Like in order for you to be able to do a surgical procedure, especially a major one, in this case, opening your thorax in order to remove a rib, that requires anesthesia, but like the Lord did the perfect anesthesia. And this deep sleep, we can see in different parts of the Bible. The word is, I believe here, let me see if I can, here we go. Tardema is the word for deep sleep that you use it in the Bible. Now, this word has many uses in the Bible. For example, in Genesis 15:12, we have, in this case, it's used as a deep sleep, but also described as a thick and dreadful darkness, like a feeling. It's also like you feel like you're in a very deep and dark sleep. You have like a very heavy sleep. It gives us another description. In 1 Samuel 26:12, we have that, remember when Saul was chasing David and David had to hide in that cave, and Saul and his army went after him, that God caused them to go into such a deep sleep that David was able to cut a piece of Saul's robe off without Saul knowing. So it's like he did not feel at all the footsteps of David or anything. And then we see in Job 4:13, in thought-filled visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on man. So thought-filled visions of the night, that kind of sounds like dreams. So again, when it's used as deep sleep on men, when deep sleep falls on man, it here describes that it is like when a human being is capable of having dreams. And then we have in Job 33:15, it says, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men as they slumber. Again, part of dreaming. And Isaiah 29:10, this deep sleep is also compared to spiritual blindness. So it's like they're so asleep that they don't wake up. In this case, you are so ignorant of the Bible that you cannot realize what's happening in the world and you cannot know what's happening. So that it also has its spiritual comparison. And in this case, we if we compare it to what we know now as the REM and non-REM stages of sleep, here we have a moment that there is like an awakening, and then we enter into REM sleep, and we have different stages of sleep until and there are different changes in your body. Like you have at some point when you are just recently going to sleep, you can probably have some different like pikes in your blood pressure and in your uh, and in your heart rate. But at a certain point, once you enter, for example, stage 3 and stage 4, where you have the slow wave sleep level, when you're entering into that deep sleep, your heart rate normally goes down, your blood pressure goes down as well, and you have different changes in your body. So, for example, the stage 3 of non-REM sleep is what we know now as deep sleep. Here we have heartbeat and breathing at their lowest levels, and it's very difficult to wake up, very difficult to wake up. As a difference to REM sleep that is close to the awakening, we have different, well, we have a moment where arm and leg muscles have to become temporarily paralyzed in order for the human body to relax and go and enter into that sleep. But this one is close to having brief awakenings. Like you have this, you can easily be waking up. So personally, I think that this deep sleep had to be between stage 3 and stage 4 of non-REM sleep in order for it to be as some way as like an anesthetic process for man to be able to not wake up. Of course, what God did exactly, no one knows, but this is personally as to what would be the deep sleep. Kind of like to have an idea, we're talking about stage 3 and stage 4 of slow wave sleep level of non-REM sleep. Anyway, so now if we continue talking, here we have the thoracic cage. This would be as to which rib the Lord removed, I'm not so sure. Probably one of the what we call like the false ribs, the floating ribs, but like it would just be to speculate, you know. But if we see the word rib in Hebrew, we have tzelah, and this word tzelah could mean rib, could also mean your side, or it could also mean boards. You know how in the structure, in the different structures that you have, you need to use sometimes boards. For example, in the ark that Noah made, or for the temple and different things, boards represented kind of like what we have in our thoracic cage, how the the ribs protect and support. It would be the same way for a building. And so like we kind of have we also see that the ribs in our case in the human body mostly function to protect very important organs of the body. We're talking about the heart, the lungs, and the major vasa, such as the aorta and the the veins, the cava veins. So those are very, very important blood vessels that need to be protected, and they connect with the heart. And of course, we also have the esophagus, you know. But the main, one of the most vital organs that we have, the lungs and the hearts, are protected by the ribs. Now, if we analyze this word "tzelah," that would be rib in its Paleo-Hebrew, we have here, I'm going to show it to you guys. We have a man on the side. Then we have here this little staff that would be the lamed. But if you kind of look at it, it kind of looks like a hook to pull out, and then to experience. So we can see it in two different ways. The first would be man on his side, man laying down. In other words, man in his deep sleep. And we are like to experience how the Lord is going to do that surgical procedure, that first surgical procedure. But also, you can also see it in another way. For example, a desire or a need toward the experience. But this whole process of the removal of the rib had to be done in order to have this experience. What experience? The experience of being complete, because this was in order for Adam to be complete as a whole with his wife Eve. Here we have and this is something interesting, because it says the Bible says that God fashioned the rib. Of course, after closing up the wound, he fashioned the rib into a woman. And as we saw in the previous creation, in the creation of man, the word used to create man was yatsar, that we saw that had to do a relation with like a potter, kind of like what a potter does. But in this case, for women, he does not use the word yatsar. That's why it's important for us to see its original Hebrew, because it's not the same word, but sometimes it can be translated as it. It's the word bana. So this word bana, its translation is actually to build, like to construct, or even this word is also translated as to have children. So it's more like to edify, to build, like to make strong, kind of like when you build a house. And it is also understood as having children in the case of in women's case. So, and if we analyze its Paleo-Hebrew, the bet, the nun, and the hey, we have, for example, bet, house. We have nun, that can mean seed, fish, activity, or life. And we have the hey, that's behold. So the house of life, behold. In other words, behold the house of life. And what do I mean by this? Because first we see that Adam was Yatsar from Adamah. In other words, he was formed kind of like potter in a clay from the dirt. But Eve was built from a rib. She was constructed from the rib. Only her. And she was built with the capacity to hold or to build life herself in her womb. So she is a woman is a house of life. Of course, it is necessary to have the human spermatozoid, the man spermatozoid, but still, women is the one that carries the product of fertility. She's the one that carries the future human baby. So she is the house of life, because in her is that the new life is being built, is being formed. So that's what I find very remarkable. And then we see that Adam says, "This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for from man she was taken." And that's something interesting too that we're going to see right now, because she says she will be called woman because from man she was taken. So here we have the word as written in the Bible. Of course, now the modern Hebrew would have a different way of writing women, but in the Bible, in the biblical Hebrew, we have for man ish and women isha. Now, what's interesting, as you guys can see, the two letters that have they both have in common would be the aleph and the shin. But what they don't have in common, one has a yud, in this case a man, and the woman has a hey. So if you put together the yud and the hey, It is the abbreviation of the name of God. That would be the Yah. Like when we say hallelujah, it's like praise unto the Lord. And that Lord is Yah, from the word, how we pronounce, how some people pronounce Yahweh. So in this case, in order, as you guys can see, when a man and a woman come together, they form the abbreviation of the name of the Lord. So that's why women had to be created. It wasn't just for nothing. That's why God said it was lo tov for man to be levado. It was not good for man to be alone, because God had seen already everything that He had planned. His whole plan, but He puts everything into such detail. How we just saw, He needed to complete that beautiful house of teaching. He needed to complete that family, that home with man and woman. And with man and woman, you guys can see that when they come together, in other words, when they become husband and wife, they form the beautiful name of God. And this can also, if we can see it in another way, in a family, in a home where God is not present, it is chaos. Why? Because if I were to remove this yud from man and this hey from woman, we have the word esh. And esh in Hebrew is fire. So fire plus fire, explosion. In a marriage, in a family, in a home where God is not present, everything will be chaos and destruction. It won't work. In a family, the Lord needs to be present. And this also shows that a man and a woman need to represent the love of the Lord and need to represent the Lord in their home. They need to show God. They need to share that light. They need to be a beautiful example, because the two of them form the name of the Lord. So if they do not reflect the Lord in their lives, then their marriage is useless. Very well. And then if we continue on and we see, for example, here, how it says later on in Genesis 2:24, it says, therefore, a man will leave his father and his mother and will join with his wife, and they will become one flesh. So if we see this join, we have davak, and this means to cling or to cleave or to keep close, like to be close to each other, to be side by side, kind of like when we saw how the Lord made a not fitting helper, but a helper to be constant, to be in front of, to be there for man. In this case, the man had to also cling and keep close to his wife, for his wife was going to be that present help in times of trouble. Then, if we see the Paleo Hebrew of Davak with the Dalit, the Bet, and the Kuf, we see it says doorway to the abode in the horizon, or doorway to the house in the horizon. And what are we talking about? It's another doorway to heaven. Just how we saw that the Shabbat was a doorway to heaven, a family should also be a doorway to heaven. And what does that mean? A family must lead their children, and the spouse and wife have to lead each other to the Lord. In other words, to be saved. That has to be the main purpose of a family, that all of them can live that beautiful life, so that when Yeshua comes again for a second time, all of that family can earn salvation and go to the New Jerusalem. That is the purpose of what it means when a man and a woman join to become spouses. That is a man and woman's duty in this world, to bring forth generations, to multiply, to be fruitful, and those generations to take them to the feet of the Lord. That is very important. Then we see that it says they will be one flesh. That word is echad. Now, another place that this word echad is mentioned is in the Shema. And what is the Shema? When it says, Shema Israel, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. That is in Deuteronomy 6, 4, and 5. And if we see right here, we're gonna check and see very interesting things. First, as I showed you last week, this is the beautiful holy name of the Lord, that we have to respect it always, be very careful with it because it is perfect and most holy. We have the word echad, and we have ahava, that is love. Now, in the name of the Lord, we have the yud, the hey, the vav, and the hey, that we have the numerical values of 10, 5, 6, and 5 that we know adds up to 26. Now, echad, we have the aleph, that's 1, the chet, that's 8, and the dalet, that's 4. So 1 plus 8 plus 4 is 13. And then in ahava, we have the aleph, the hey, the bet, and the hey. That would be 1, 5, 2, and 5. That if we add it up, it's also 13. So the Bible tells us that the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and it also says that the Lord our God is love. So the Lord is one, and his love is one. That's why love and one. If we add up 13 and 13, we have 26. So our God is one. He is love. His love is one, and the only one true love is our God. And that kind of love has to be expressed as well in a marriage too. When they shall become one, it's to symbolize how the Lord in the future is going to be one with his people. When he comes again to bring his people to the New Jerusalem, there's going to be the marriage supper of the Lamb. And there he is going to come as the bridegroom and his beautiful people as the bride, and they're going to become one, and we're all going to live in perfection in the beautiful New Jerusalem. But that beautiful moment that is perfect and none can compare to it has to be in some way shadowed and portrayed in the marriages that we have here on earth now. So I think that is something very beautiful. And what I also find interesting, of course, it probably has not much to do, but like the chapter that talks about love is in Corinthians 13. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, then in order to finish, this would be the last part of chapter 2. And this, I want you guys to pay very much attention because this last part of chapter 2 is going to link us and help us understand what's coming up in chapter 3. In chapter 2, it says, in verse 25, it says that both Adam and Eve were naked and they were not ashamed of being naked. Okay, oops, I'm sorry, Dad. Here we go. So here we have the word naked is arom. Okay, arom. Arom comes from the Hebrew word ur, and this ur means to be exposed or to be bare. And I'm going to explain this in just a moment. And if we see the Paleo Hebrew of the word arom, the ayin, the resh, the vav, and the mem, we have experienced the beginning connected to chaos. So you guys are like, what's that supposed to mean? We're gonna find out next week in chapter 3. Then what I want to tell you is that this arom, this to be exposed or to be bare, to be naked, does not only mean to be physically exposed. In this case, of course, they had no clothing, they were naked. But it also means to be spiritually exposed or to be in some way like susceptible or to be easy to access. That's why it's now next week we're going to experience the beginning connected to chaos. But I want you guys to keep this in mind because next week we're going to tie this one with the next chapter. That is what? Adam and Eve's disobedience with the cunning deception of the serpent. So if you guys want to know what happens next chapter and how it has a connection with this word that is naked, ahom, then stay tuned for next video. I'm going to here stop sharing. Thank you very much, guys. I hope that this teaching has been a blessing for all of you. And if you find that this teaching has been a blessing, please hit that like button. Comment if you want to add something more to this teaching, or if you would like have some questions to be answered, and share it with your friends and family so that more people can hear the word of our Lord, and more people can get closer and closer to Him. If you want to be a part of this ministry, you can also write in the comments, because again, we're Youth for Torah, so all youth are more than welcome. Thank you, and we'll see each other next week, and may the Lord bless you. Bye-bye.